Fleet Commander Yirith stood before the great viewing window of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched his armada gather in the darkness of space. 400 warships moved into formation, their silver hulls catching the light of distant stars. It was a beautiful sight. It was power made visible. For 12,000 years, the Valorian Confederacy had ruled the Orion Spur. They had brought more than 200 species under their control. Some had joined willingly, seeing the wisdom of surrender. Others had resisted and learned the price of defiance. But in the end, all had bowed. All had accepted their place beneath Valorian rule. Yirith had commanded 17 subjugation fleets in his long career. He had watched primitive species fall to their knees at the mere sight of his ships. He had seen advanced civilizations calculate the odds and choose survival over pride. Not once had he faced true resistance. Not once had blood been spilled in meaningful amounts. This was how the Confederacy worked. They arrived with overwhelming force. They demonstrated their power. They accepted surrender. It was clean. It was efficient. It had never failed. "Commander," said Advisor Melax, approaching with a data tablet in her slender hands. "The final intelligence reports on the target species have arrived." Yirith turned from the window. Melax was young for her position, but sharp. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she waited for his attention. "Tell me about these." "Humans," Yirith said. He let the strange word roll off his tongue. Such an odd name for a species. "They are young, Commander. Barely 300 years into space travel. They have colonized only a handful of worlds in their home system." Melax scrolled through the data. Their civilization is fragmented. Multiple governments, competing factions, constant internal disagreements. They appear to spend as much energy fighting each other as they do exploring the stars. Yirith made a sound of dismissal. "Children, then. Squabbling children who have not yet learned to unite. That is the assessment, Commander. Their military capability is minimal by our standards. A few defensive stations. Patrol craft. Nothing that could threaten even a small portion of our fleet." "Then why do we bring 400 ships?" Yirith asked. He already knew the answer, but he enjoyed hearing it spoken aloud. "Protocol demands overwhelming force for first contact subjugation," Melax recited. "The target species must understand immediately that resistance is not merely difficult, but impossible. They must see their own insignificance reflected in our strength." "Precisely." Yirith clasped his hands behind his back. "When they see our armada fill their sky, they will know their place. They will surrender, and we will add another species to the Confederacy. Another world. Another resource. The High Council will be pleased." He turned back to the window, watching the last ship slide into position. The formation was perfect. Every vessel knew its place, its purpose. This was the order the Valorians brought to the galaxy. This was civilization. "There is one anomaly in the reports," Melax said, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty. "Speak." "Their communications. We have been monitoring their radio signals for some time." Melax paused, choosing her words carefully. "They speak of something called war with unusual frequency." Yirith frowned. "War? You mean conflict? Territorial disputes?" "More than that, Commander. Their historical records are filled with it. Massive conflicts. Millions of casualties. They have developed entire fields of study around the practice of organized violence." Melax's eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of her discomfort. "No other species in our records has shown such dedication to harming themselves." For a moment, Yirith said nothing. He stared at the stars and considered this information. A species that practiced violence upon itself. A species that had made destruction into an art form. It should have concerned him. Instead, he laughed. Do you not see what this means, Melax? They are broken, divided. They turn their weapons on their own kind because they know no better. He shook his head with something close to pity. When we arrive, they will finally have a worthy master. We will give them the unity they have never found on their own. They will be grateful. Melax nodded slowly, but Yurith caught the doubt in her expression. He did not blame her. She was young. She had not yet learned that the universe followed predictable patterns. Strong species rose. Weak species submitted. Violent species burned themselves out. This was the natural order. Signal the fleet, Yurith commanded. We enter slipspace in 1 hour. Set course for the human system. 4. So, they call it. Yes, Commander. As Melax departed, Yurith remained at the window. He thought about the humans and their endless wars. He thought about the blood they had spilled, the cities they had burned, the weapons they had turned on their own brothers and sisters. How strange, he mused. A species that practices violence upon itself. They will break easily. In the distance, the slipspace drives of 400 warships began to glow. The Armada hummed with power, with purpose, with the absolute certainty of victory. They were the Valorian Confederacy. They had never known defeat. Yurith allowed himself a small smile. This mission would be simple. The humans would see his fleet and understand their helplessness. They would surrender, as all species did, and the Confederacy would continue its eternal march across the stars. He did not know that in the Sol system, ancient warning systems were already waking. He did not know that deep in military bunkers on a dozen worlds, officers were receiving alerts and activating protocols that had waited generations. For this moment, he did not know that humanity had always known this day would come, and they had prepared. In the darkness of space, the Armada entered slipspace, carrying 400 ships and 40,000 Valorian souls toward a species they believed was weak, toward a civilization they believed was broken. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Armada emerged from slipspace like a tide of silver death. 400 warships tore through the fabric of reality and spread across the void in perfect formation. Behind them, the slipspace ruptures sealed themselves, leaving only the cold darkness of normal space. Yurith stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion and studied the tactical display. They had arrived at the outer edge of the human system, near a moon the humans called Europa. Sensors immediately began feeding data to his officers. Report, Yurith commanded. Minimal orbital defenses detected, the sensor officer announced. 3 stations around Europa. 12 patrol craft in the immediate area. No capital ships within sensor range. Yurith nodded. It was exactly as the intelligence had predicted. The humans were unprepared. They had no fleet waiting to meet him, no armada of their own. Just a handful of stations and small craft, like insects before a storm. Open a channel, Yurith ordered. Broadcast the standard surrender demand on all frequencies. The communications officer worked his console. A moment later, the message was sent. It was the same message the Confederacy had used for thousands of years. Surrender your worlds. Accept Valorian rule. Resistance will be met with annihilation. Simple, clear, effective. They waited. On the tactical display, Yurith watched the human patrol craft. He expected them to scatter. He expected panic, confusion, desperate attempts to flee. That was how it always happened. That was how prey responded to predators. But the patrol craft did not move. They maintained their positions, their courses unchanged. It was as if the arrival of 400 warships meant nothing to them. Commander, the communications officer said, his voice puzzled. We are receiving a response, on speaker. A human voice filled the bridge. It was calm, unhurried, almost bored. This is Europa Traffic Control. Please hold. Redirecting your communication to UENF command. Then silence. Irith stared at the speaker as if it had grown teeth. Please hold? He had just threatened to annihilate their civilization, and they had asked him to wait. What is UENF? He demanded. Malax checked her data tablet. United Earth Naval Forces, Commander. Their military organization. Why are they not afraid? One of the bridge officers muttered. It was not a question directed at anyone in particular. It was the sound of confusion meeting something it could not understand. Minutes passed. On the tactical display, nothing changed. The patrol craft continued their routes. The stations remained at their posts. The humans went about their business as if 400 warships were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Then the communication system crackled again. Valorian vessels, this is UENF command. UENF Battle Group Thermopylae is en route to your position. Estimated arrival, 4 standard hours. You are advised to hold position and state your intentions. The message ended. Irith felt something cold settle in his chest. It was not fear. He did not know fear, but it was something close. Something uncomfortable. They are sending ships, Malax said quietly. They are not surrendering. They are sending ships. 1 battle group against 400? Irith forced confidence into his voice. They are fools. They will see our strength and reconsider. But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his mind. No species had ever responded this way. No species had ever heard the surrender demand and answered with calm military deployment. They should be begging. They should be fleeing. They should be doing anything except treating this like a routine matter. Commander, the sensor officer said. His voice had changed. There was something tight in it now, something strained. I am detecting an anomaly. Explain. Slipspace readings at the edge of sensor range. Something is preparing to exit slipspace. The officer paused. But the readings are wrong. Wrong how? The rupture forming. It is too large. Too violent. The energy signature does not match any known drive system. The officer's hands were shaking as he worked his console. Commander, I have never seen readings like this. Whatever is coming through, it is big. Irith moved to the sensor station and looked at the data himself. The numbers made no sense. The energy output was impossible. No ship could generate such a signature. No drive could tear such a hole in reality, and yet something was doing exactly that. All ships, defensive positions, Irith ordered. His voice was steady, but his hearts were beating faster now. Prepare for contact with unknown vessel. Across the Armada, 400 ships shifted formation. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. 40,000 Valorian sailors prepared for something they had never truly faced before, the unknown. On the tactical display, the slipspace rupture grew larger. It was a wound in the fabric of space, bleeding light that seemed wrong somehow. The light was too bright, too harsh, too angry. The rupture is stabilizing, the sensor officer reported. Something is coming through. Something... He stopped. His eyes went wide. Commander, he whispered. You need to see this. Irith looked at the main view screen. The slipspace rupture had opened fully now, a tear in reality that burned with impossible light. And from that tear, something was emerging. It was a ship. It was only one ship. But as it cleared the rupture, and the sensors finally got a clear reading, Irith felt his blood turn to ice. By the stars, Malax breathed. What is that? Irith had no answer. He could only stare at the monster that the humans had sent to meet him. He could only watch as humanity revealed the truth that his intelligence reports had missed. The humans had not been unprepared. They had been waiting. The human ship emerged from slipspace like a nightmare given form. Urith had seen warships from 100 different species. He had seen elegant vessels with curves like ocean waves. He had seen angular craft that cut through space like blades. He had seen ships of crystal and ships of living metal and ships that sang with energy. All of them had been beautiful in their own way. All of them had been built to inspire awe. This ship was not beautiful. This ship was built to kill Dot. It was a slab of blackened metal, brutal and ugly and wrong. 12 kilometers of death stretched across the void, its hull scarred and pitted from battles unknown. There was no elegance to its design, no grace, no attempt to please the eye or calm the mind. Every line, every angle, every surface existed for one purpose only: destruction. Weapons bristled from every part of its body. Urith counted gun batteries, missile tubes, energy projectors, and systems he could not even identify. They were not hidden or integrated into the hull as Valorian designers preferred. They were exposed, visible, pointed outward like the spines of some prehistoric beast. A warning made of metal and fire. One ship, someone whispered on the bridge. They sent one ship. Urith understood the disbelief in that voice. He had brought 400 warships, the pride of the Confederacy, the mightiest fleet he had ever commanded. And the humans had answered with a single vessel Dot at first. He wanted to laugh. 1 against 400? It was madness. It was arrogance beyond reason. But the laugh would not come. Full sensor analysis, Urith ordered. His voice sounded strange in his own ears. I want to know everything about that ship. The sensor officer worked his console with trembling hands. Data flowed across the screens, and with each new reading, the silence on the bridge grew heavier. Hull composition is unlike anything in our database, the officer reported. Multiple layers of ultra-dense metals. The outer armor alone would require sustained fire from a dozen of our ships to penetrate. The power output. He stopped, checked his readings, checked them again. The power output is equivalent to a small star. That is impossible, Melak said. The readings do not lie, advisor. That ship is generating more energy than our entire armada combined. Urith gripped the railing before him. His claws dug into the metal. On the view screen, the human ship had come to a complete stop. It faced his armada directly, its weapons silent but ready. It did not advance. It did not retreat. It simply waited. The weapons systems, Urith said. What can you tell me? The sensor officer swallowed hard. I count 47 distinct weapon types, Commander. Some match known human designs from our intelligence files, but many are unknown. I am detecting what appears to be planetary siege weapons mounted on mobile platforms. Ship killer missiles in quantities that exceed our entire fleet's payload. Point defense systems dense enough to create an impenetrable wall of fire. They built a fortress, Malak said quietly. A fortress that can move. No, another officer said. His voice was barely above a whisper. They did not build a fortress. They built a death sentence and taught it to fly. The words hung in the air. No one corrected him. No one disagreed. Urith stared at the human ship and tried to understand what he was seeing. Valorian ships were built to project power, to inspire fear through beauty and precision. They were meant to show that their creators were civilized, advanced, worthy of rule. The humans had built something else entirely. They had built a ship that expected to fight enemies who outnumbered it. They had built a ship that expected to take damage, to suffer wounds, to bleed. They had built a ship that expected its crew might die, and they had built it to make sure it would not die alone. This was not a weapon of conquest. This was not a tool of domination. This was a promise. A simple, terrible promise. You may destroy us, but we will take you with us. Commander, the communications officer said. The human vessel is transmitting. On speaker. A new voice filled the bridge. It was a woman's voice, calm and firm, speaking in accented but clear Valorian. This is Captain Andidi Okonkwo of the United Earth Naval Ship Consequence. You have entered United Earth space with hostile intent. You have threatened our worlds and our people. You may withdraw peacefully, or you may proceed with your aggression. The choice is yours. The transmission ended. Urith looked at the name displayed on his tactical screen. UENS Consequence. Such a simple word. Such a heavy meaning. They named it Consequence, he said aloud. Commander? Malax asked. Their ship. They called it Consequence. Urith felt something like wonder mixing with his fear. They did not name it Victory or Triumph or Glory. They named it Consequence. They are not promising to win. They are promising make us pay. On the view screen, the Consequence waited. Its weapons remained silent, but Urith could feel them watching. He could feel the thousands of human sailors inside that metal beast, ready to fight, ready to die. Ready to prove that their species would not go quietly into extinction, that he had come to subjugate a primitive civilization, that he had found something else entirely. What are your orders, Commander? Malax asked. Urith did not answer immediately. He looked at his Armada, 400 ships strong. He looked at the single human vessel that had come to meet them. He thought about the intelligence reports, about the humans and their endless wars. About a species that had spent 10,000 years learning to kill, and he wondered, for the first time in his long career, if he had made a terrible mistake. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion had fallen silent. Officers stood at their stations, but no one moved. No one spoke. They stared at the human warship on their screens, and they waited for their commander to tell them what to do. Urith needed time to think. Full tactical analysis, he ordered. I want to know our chances if we engage that vessel. His tactical officer worked quickly, feeding data into the combat computer. The results came back within minutes, and when the officer read them aloud, his voice shook. If we concentrate fire from our entire armada on the human ship, we have a 73% chance of destroying it within 1 hour. The officer paused. However, during that hour, the human ship would inflict casualties of between 60 and 80% on our fleet. The numbers hit Urith like a physical blow. 60 to 80%. That meant 240 to 320 ships destroyed. Thousands of his people killed. And that was the best-case scenario against a single enemy vessel. There is more, Commander, the tactical officer continued. The human transmission mentioned a battle group en route. If their other ships are of similar design, and they arrive during our engagement. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Urith turned to Malax. Bring me everything we have on human military history. Everything. While Malax gathered the data, Urith studied the Consequence on his view screen. The ship had not moved since its arrival. It simply floated in the void, facing his armada, waiting. Its silence was more threatening than any weapon fire. Commander, Malax said, returning with her data tablet. The files are extensive. Human military history spans more than 10,000 years. Summarize. Malax took a deep breath. They have never stopped fighting, Commander. Their recorded history begins with war. Every generation has known conflict. They have developed weapons that could destroy their entire planet. And then they developed defenses against those weapons. And then they developed new weapons to overcome those defenses. She scrolled through the data, her eyes moving rapidly. They have fought wars that lasted for years. For decades. They have lost millions of their own kind in single conflicts and continued fighting anyway. They have developed strategies, tactics, philosophies of warfare that fill libraries. Why? Urith asked. Why would any species do this to itself? The record suggests many reasons: territory, resources, religion, ideology, pride. Melak shook her head. But the result is the same. They have spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing. Every generation has passed its knowledge to the next. Every war has taught them new lessons. They have made themselves into something. She trailed off, searching for the right word. Something terrible, Irith finished. Yes, Commander. Something terrible. Irith finally understood what he was facing. The Confederacy had conquered the stars through intimidation. They arrived in force, demonstrated their power, and accepted surrender. It was efficient. It was bloodless. It worked because no species wanted to fight a war. They could not win. But the humans were different. The humans had spent their entire existence fighting wars they were not certain they could win. They fought anyway. They bled anyway. They died anyway. And they kept fighting until victory or extinction. The Valorians had never truly fought a war. They had conducted exterminations. They had absorbed the weak. They had intimidated the strong. But war, real war, where both sides suffered and both sides died and both sides refused to quit. That was something the Confederacy had never experienced. The humans had invented it. Commander, Captain Torvax said, stepping forward. He was one of Ureth's most aggressive officers, a veteran of 12 subjugation campaigns. We must attack. We outnumber them 400 to 1. Even with their capabilities, we can win, can we? Ureth asked. Yes. We sacrifice a portion of our fleet. We destroy that abomination, and we proceed with the subjugation. It is the Valorian way. It is what the Confederacy expects. Ureth looked at Torvax. He saw the certainty in the captain's eyes, the absolute confidence of someone who had never known true defeat. It was the same confidence Ureth himself had felt just hours ago. Tell me, Torvax, Ureth said quietly. What happens after we destroy that ship? We proceed with the subjugation. And when the humans do not surrender, when they fight for every world, every station, every rock in the system, when they bleed us for every meter of space we try to take. Torvax hesitated. They will surrender eventually. All species surrender. Do they? Ureth pointed at the view screen. Look at that ship, Torvax. Look at what they built. That is not a vessel designed for species that surrenders. That is a vessel designed for a species that would rather die than kneel. He turned to face his bridge crew, seeing the fear and uncertainty in their eyes. The humans have been fighting each other for 10,000 years. They have built weapons to destroy worlds. They have survived conflicts that would have ended any other species. And when they finally reached the stars and wondered if they were alone, they built ships like that one. He gestured at the consequence. They built it because they expected this moment. They expected someone to come and try to conquer them. And they decided, long before we arrived, that they would not allow it. They would fight. They would bleed. They would die. But they would not submit. The bridge was silent. We could win this battle, Ureth said. We could destroy that ship. But there would be more ships. There would always be more ships. Because the humans have spent their entire existence preparing for threats like us. And they will never stop fighting until we are destroyed or we leave them alone. He looked at the consequence one final time. What manner of species builds something like that and calls it consequence? He whispered. A species that wants us to understand exactly what will happen if we proceed. Ureth made his decision. Open a channel to the human ship. The communication channel opened with a soft chime. On the view screen, the image of the consequence was replaced by a human face. Captain Nendidia Konkoul was not what Ureth had expected. She was small by Valorian standards, with dark skin and close-cropped gray hair. Her eyes were calm, steady, and utterly without fear. She sat in a command chair surrounded by displays and officers, and she regarded Urith with the patience of someone who had all the time in the universe. "Fleet Commander Urith," she said. Her pronunciation of his name was slightly wrong, but he understood her clearly. "I did not expect to hear from you so soon. Have you made your decision?" Urith straightened his posture. 400 ships waited behind him. 40,000 of his people watched this moment. What he said next would echo across the galaxy. "Captain Okonkwo," he began, "I wish to ask you a question. Ask, what do your people want?" The captain's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or surprise that she was being asked at all. "We want to be left alone," she said. "We want to explore the stars, build our colonies, and live our lives without interference. We have no interest in conquering others. We have seen enough conquest in our own history to last us forever. And if you cannot be left alone?" Captain Okonkwo leaned forward slightly. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the softness. "Then we want to make the cost of aggression higher than any enemy is willing to pay. We want anyone who threatens our worlds to understand exactly what they will lose if they proceed." She paused. "That is why we built ships like the Consequence. Not because we want war, because we want peace. And we have learned that peace must be defended." Urith considered her words. He thought about the Confederacy, about 12,000 years of easy victories and bloodless conquests. He thought about his people, who had forgotten what it meant to truly fight. He thought about the future, about the wars that would come if he gave the order to attack. And he thought about the humans, who had spent 10,000 years learning lessons the Valorians had never needed to learn. "I am going to order my armada to withdraw," Urith said. Behind him, he heard gasps from his officers. Captain Torvax made a sound of protest, but Urith silenced him with a raised hand. "In exchange," Urith continued, "I request that you allow a diplomatic envoy to approach. I wish to open formal negotiations between the Valorian Confederacy and your United Earth." Captain Okonkwo studied him for a long moment. Her face revealed nothing. Then, slowly, she nodded. "That is acceptable. But I should warn you, Commander. 12 more battle groups are en route to this position. They will arrive within 8 hours. Whatever negotiations you wish to conduct, I suggest you conduct them quickly. 12 more battle groups. 12 more fleets of ships like the Consequence." Urith felt the weight of that number settle on his shoulders. "Understood," he said. "We will begin immediately." The channel closed. Urith turned to face his bridge crew. They stared at him with a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been relief. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "We are withdrawing to neutral space. And send a message to High Command. Tell them." He paused, searching for the right words. "Tell them that the situation has changed." 3 weeks later, Urith stood before the High Council of the Valorian Confederacy. The council chamber was vast, ancient, and designed to intimidate. 12 counselors sat in elevated positions, looking down at him like judges at a trial. "You retreated," Counselor Veth said. Her voice dripped with contempt. "You had 400 ships, and you retreated from a single enemy vessel." "I chose survival over pride," Urith replied calmly. "If we had attacked, we would have lost more than half our fleet in the first engagement alone. And then we would have faced a war against an enemy that has spent 10,000 years preparing for exactly that kind of conflict." "We are the Confederacy," another counselor snapped. "We do not retreat. We do not negotiate with primitives." "With respect, Counselor, the humans are not primitives." Urith gestured, and the sensor data from his encounter appeared on the chamber's display screens. The image of the Consequence filled the room, its brutal silhouette casting shadows on the counselors' faces. This is what they sent to meet us. One ship. They have hundreds more. And they have been fighting wars since before our civilization discovered fire. The council chamber fell silent. The counselors studied the data, and Urith watched their expressions change. Contempt became concern. Concern became fear. My recommendation is this, Urith said. Do not engage the humans. Propose trade. Seek alliance. Under no circumstances provoke open conflict. They do not want war, but they are prepared for it. More prepared than we have ever been. The debate lasted for hours. But in the end, the council accepted his recommendation. 1 month later, a Valorian diplomatic vessel arrived in Earth orbit. Ambassador Tezin stepped onto a human space station and was greeted by a delegation of smiling, peaceful beings who seemed genuinely happy to make new friends. As they walked through the station, Tezin asked a question that had been burning in his mind since he received this assignment. Why? He said, your species is capable of such destruction. You have built weapons that could tear civilizations apart. Yet you speak of peace, of cooperation, of friendship. How do you reconcile these things? The human ambassador, a tall man with kind eyes, considered the question carefully. Because we have seen what happens when you cannot defend what you love, he said. We have done terrible things to each other. We have burned cities and broken nations and made ourselves into monsters. We know what war truly costs. He stopped walking and turned to face Tezin. We build ships like the consequence because we never want to fight. But we have learned, through centuries of blood and sorrow, that peace is not given. It must be earned. It must be defended. And sometimes, the only way to prevent war is to make your enemies understand that the cost of fighting is too high to pay. Tezin nodded slowly. He thought about the Valorian Confederacy, about their easy conquests and bloodless victories. He thought about all the species they had absorbed, all the worlds they had claimed without effort, and he wondered if the humans might have something to teach them after all. In the years that followed, a new phrase spread across the galaxy. It was whispered in council chambers and shouted in military academies. It was written in diplomatic treaties and carved into the hulls of warships. 3 simple words that carried the weight of 10,000 years of human history. Do not wake the humans.